We associate us with taking the Native Americans' land and then them fighting back, and that's when things get ugly. But it turns out this was just a wild way of life that they had had for who knows how many years.
It would be better if they would go ahead and kill him now. He would become the nightmare. The bucks who survive the summers would tell their squaws of in the winters. He would show them a legend, and they would give him a name. The Savage of the Hills. It would draw them a target. If he could survive the day, they would never kill him again.
There have been several accounts of backwoodsmen and scouts upon the northwestern Virginia frontier. These accounts often tell of the lives and exploits of the frontier heroes who managed to save the settlers of their respective areas from attacks from hostile Indians. These frontiersmen did contribute significantly to the safety and expansion of border settlements, but often did so by committing savage acts of brutality. But who can judge a man, yet they walk a mile in his shoes? For the frontier was no place for the weak of heart. John and Samuel Pringle were soldiers in the British Army stationed at Fort Pitt during the French and Indian War. They apparently tired of the military life because in 1761, they deserted their post and settled for about a year near the South Branch of the Potomac River. While following the river, the brothers came across a large hollowed-out sycamore tree at the spot that a small creek that they named Turkey Run meets the Buchanan near present-day Buchanan, West Virginia. They took up residence in this tree until 1767, when the need for powder and shot overcame their fear of being caught. John left his brother Samuel with the powder and shot for 2 loads and went in search of a settlement where he could attain necessities for a wilderness life. With his return, he brought exciting news. Dunmore's war was over, since peace was found with the French and the Indians, and they were no longer criminals for their desertion. They could once again rejoin society. In 1769, they returned to their home near the South Fork of the Potomac, but Samuel soon returned to the area where they had lived in the Sycamore on Turkey Run. He took with him a small group of prospective settlers. Among them was a young man of 19 years old named Jesse Hughes. Jesse Hughes was a frontiersman and Indian fighter, and he was born near the Potomac South Branch in 1750. Hughes grew up on the borderland of the then western frontier of America. He spent most of his time in the woods surrounding his home and was known to be a fierce young man.
At sundown, I beheld a small party coming in with about a dozen prisoners. I stood on the fort wall until I beheld them begin to burn one of these men. They had him tied to a stake and kept touching him with firebrands.
There are many accounts of Hughes's savage nature, According to a woman who knew Jesse as a child, Hughes's countenance was hard, stern, and unfeeling. His temper was fierce and uncontrollable. His eyes were the most cruel and vicious she ever saw. It is said of him, when scouting, his dress consisted only of the long hunting shirt belted at the waist, open leggings, moccasins, and a brimless cap or a handkerchief bound about his head. According to the stories, all of his clothing was dyed with the ooze made from the bark of the chestnut oak, so that he may better camouflage in the woods. In 1769, at the age of 19, Jesse left his home at the Wapatamaca in search of new lands to explore. He joined Samuel Pringle in settling the area around the Buchanan River, where Samuel and his brother had lived earlier. Jesse married Grace Tanner around 1771 and settled into a cabin he built on Hacker's Creek, near West's Fort, and at the mouth of what was called Jesse's Run. Most of the time he scouted and hunted for the settlers. Standing about 5'9" tall, he was a lean, strong, and fast man of delicate frame and iron constitution. Jesse Hughes was one of the most skilled frontiersmen of his time in northwestern Virginia or north central West Virginia. His hunting and scouting skills were unmatched by most in that area. It is said that his brother Elias Hughes was a better shot at long range, but Jesse was the better tracker and hunter. Hughes's hatred of the Indians ran so deeply through him at this point in his life that it was wondered if he lived for little else. When his father was killed by Indians in 1778, it seems to have ignited a spark of hatred that burned within him. In late April 1778, Jesse's father, Thomas, was shot by a Shawnee raiding party while he was helping tend the farm of a neighbor on Hacker's Creek. With the news of his father's death, Jesse's hatred for Indians increased. Jesse and his brother Elias made a vow to kill Indians as long as they lived and could see to kill them. An incident of Hughes's brutality towards Indians was shown when he and a group of scouts set out to recover settlers who had been taken by an Indian raiding party. Upon reaching the place where the Indians were staying for the night, the scouts killed the Indians with their rifles. They then ran into the Indian camp and found that one of the wounded Indians was Captain Bull, the founder of Bulltown. Jesse, seeing that he was still alive, picked him up and dragged him into the coals of a freshly tended fire while he was yet a-kicking. After the chief had died, Hughes pulled out his knife and cut off pieces of his skin. He then used the skin to patch the holes in his moccasins. There are many accounts that show Jesse Hughes to be a cold-hearted man, alongside a fierce life fighting Indians, and being a protector of the settlers. At one point during an escalation of conflict within the borderlands, Hughes lashed out. Hughes arranged a meeting with a known Indian mediator of the area so they could hunt together. He chose a place to meet that would require the Indian to come across Hacker's Creek on a footlog, or a log that has fallen across the creek. Hughes crept on silent feet well before the appointed meeting time to a thicket near the footlog so that he would have a clear view. There he lay and waited until the Indian was in the middle of the footlog, aimed, and fired upon him. Hitting his mark, the Indian fell lifelessly into the creek. These are a few of the many accounts of Jesse Hughes's savagery against Indians. He was said to have liked to kill an Indian rather than eat his dinner. The Indians and white settlers both led a very tenuous life that required them to always be on guard. Both groups were constantly seeking to kill the other at any cost. The presence of Hughes may have been necessary to secure the settlement in which he lived due to his extraordinary abilities to survive in the woods. Jesse Hughes was not the only frontiersman who had these vicious tendencies. Perhaps the most famous frontiersman of northwestern Virginia in the 18th century also had these tendencies. A man named Louis Wetzel. Though not as well known as Simon Kenton or Louis Wetzel, Hughes was their equal when it came to tracking and killing his foe. To pioneers, he was a protector and friend. In the clash between Indians and the land acquisitive whites, he was invaluable in helping the settlers to prevail. His vengeful streak found terrible outlets in atrocities against the natives, but he saved many lives at great personal risk and experienced many harrowing escapades. Hughes participated in the Battle of Point Pleasant with his younger brothers Thomas and Elias. His service as a ranger was apparently with volunteer companies, but never in command, possibly because of his unstable temperament. When the Ohio Valley Frontier Wars ended in the 1790s, Jesse Hughes was left with no occupation, still ready to fight, but with no enemies to pursue. He moved to Vincennes, Indiana, then to eastern Kentucky. By 1800, he had returned to West Virginia, settling on Turkey Run, just above Ravenswood. After some years, he moved to Sand Creek to farm and hunt, but was later legally disposed of this land at the age of 79. Homeless, he moved back with his family to Turkey Run to live with a daughter, where he died in the fall of 1829. Jesse had carried a pewter teapot with him through the Virginia wilderness. He had to cut off the spout and handle of the teapot in a battle for his life to make bullets when he ran out. The legendary Jesse Hughes was in at least one battle in which he ran out of ammunition. The evidence was left in the relic of this pewter teapot taken with him on his trips through the wilderness. The Hughes family legend handed down with the remains of this teapot was that he had to make pewter bullets from its spout and handle at some point to survive. Pewter bullets were not unusual in his day. Lots of early English American pewter was melted down during the Revolution for bullets. But life was necessary, and those who wander in the wilderness had to do what they had to do to survive. To many today, the men who explored and settled these hills were savages and deserved the recognition of a dog in the history books. But to the frontiers people whose lives were spared because of their courage and fortitude, they are known as frontier heroes. Man enough to forge through the fire and the flames of these tumultuous times and etch their names into the history books. Well, thank you for checking out the channel. Please be sure to hit that like button and subscribe to the channel and share this video with your friends. And as always, remember to get out there and explore. Thanks, guys.